What is going on, everyone? Today is Spy Wednesday. Out of all of the days of Holy Week, this one definitely has the coolest name. I'm not making that up. That actually is its name throughout church history. For thousands of years, it's been called Spy Wednesday. And though the name is cool, the reason behind the name isn't as cool. It gets that name because today is the day in the life of Jesus where he gets betrayed, where Judas goes and sells Jesus out to the scribes and to the Pharisees. And so it gets Spy Wednesday because Judas was a spy. He would go and give the other people, the Pharisees, the scribes, the Jewish leaders, information about Jesus. And so today is the day that we typically would commemorate that. But I don't just want to focus on Judas's betrayal. I actually want to kind of back up and focus on the event, the straw that broke the camel's back for Judas, the thing that would lead him ultimately finally to betray Jesus. And that story comes to us in Mark chapter 14. It starts this way in verse 3. And while he was at Bethany, he being Jesus, while Jesus was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, as he was reclining at table, a woman came with an alabaster flask of ointment of pure nard, very costly. And she broke the flask and poured it over his head. There were some who said to themselves indignantly, "Why was this ointment wasted like that? For this ointment could have been sold for more than 300 denarii and given to the poor." And they scolded her. But Jesus said, "Leave her alone. Why do you trouble her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. For you always have the poor with you, and whenever you want, you can do good for them. But you will not always have me. She has done what she could. She has anointed my body beforehand for burial. And truly I say to you, wherever the gospel is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in memory of her." Every time I read this story, I'm just shocked by the commitment level of this lady, by her willingness to just be all in on her generosity, on her commitment to who Jesus is. This thing that she has, this jar of nard, it would have been like a perfume or a fragrant substance, and it was super expensive. Like, this actually was so expensive, it was probably a status symbol for her family, like, right, the kind of thing that you put up on like the banister so that everybody can see that you've got it and be like, wow, that's so impressive, that's so cool, that item in your house that you want people to just marvel at. Like, that's what this was for them. It was a status symbol for her family probably. And she just walks in and she breaks the jar and dumps it over Jesus' feet. Like, there's a level of commitment to, like, but when you break that jar, you're not getting it back in. You can't, like, you're just not, like, you can't, once it's out, it's not going back. Once you break that, you are all in, you are committed. All of that is going out to Jesus. And so she literally goes all in on him. She gives everything to him. And I'm always just shocked by the fact that this woman would be that devoted, that emotional in the moment, that she would give such an enormous gift to Jesus in a way that she can't take it back. It's not like she can come back tomorrow and be like, "Hey, Jesus, actually, I gave you something yesterday in the heat of a moment." Like, no, like, it's done, it's over with. You can't take that back. But then I think back to a story, something that I got to experience once. I had a professor in Bible college. He was preaching at a chapel service. He was preaching a sermon on generosity. And at the end of his sermon, he did what he called a reverse offering. So a typical offering, right, would work that you pass out some buckets or some trays or something, and people would put money into it, and then you take it back up. But he did the opposite. He actually brought all the trays and the buckets to him, and he put a bunch of money in and passed it out to all of us, and we got to take money out. Now, the stipulation, the condition of that was, whatever you took out, you were supposed to match it and give generously to somebody else. This professor put literally thousands of dollars into these buckets and passed them out to us. And then what we were supposed to do in return, right? So if you took out a $5 bill, you were supposed to take a $5 bill of your own and give $10 to someone else. That was the call. He said, I'm being generous to you, so now you go be generous to someone else. We're going to spread generosity here. And when he did that, right, like, there's a level of excitement, of even encouragement of like, man, this guy's being so generous and he's giving $1,000 and he's just calling me to give $10 so I can go do that. I can be a part of this. This is so cool. And if you didn't do it, there was a level of guilt that came with it, right? Like, I just got this $5 and I was told to go do something with it. And instead I'm going to sit on it. Instead, that doesn't seem quite right. And so there's an understanding here, I think, by this woman that God has blessed her so abundantly. He's given her blessings in her life. He's done things like he didn't even consider his own son too high of a price for her. He gave his only son for her. And so the least she can do is give something back in return. The least she can do is be generous in this way. God's been radically generous to her, so she can be radically generous back. But on the other side, you have the disciples, and Mark doesn't specify here specifically who he's talking about, but other gospels tell us that Judas is the one who voices the complaint. And he did it because he was greedy. Because he wanted that money for himself, for the disciples, right? He's like, well, Jesus, maybe on our next missionary trip we can get better hotel rooms, or we can upgrade our boat for the next time we're traveling. Judas did it because he wanted for himself. And this event actually drives Judas so much so that he would leave and sell Jesus out. Instead of giving generously to Jesus, he's going to give Jesus up generously for other things. And really the text leaves us asking this question: am I going to give everything for Jesus and to Jesus? Or am I going to give up Jesus for everything else? Those are kind of the two options. You've got the woman who gives generously and radically generously to Jesus. And then you've got Judas who gives up Jesus for everything else. And the question is, which of the two are we going to be? The thing is, we serve a radically generous God, a God who has given us blessing upon blessing. Like the whole point of Holy Week is that we get to celebrate the fact that he didn't consider his own son too much to give up for us. That he would give his own son in our place, that he would die and raise again victorious for our benefit. That's how much God loves you, and that's how generous he is. And if God is that generous, that he calls us to be generous in return. That because we serve a radically generous God, we can now be radically generous.